Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Luigi Nagin. I'm one of our directors of product here at NEOGOV, a leading provider of a high-quality, easy-to-use HR, payroll, and talent management solution for the public sector. We're excited to have you here I'm here and excited to moderate our webinar, The Battle for Talent, Insight, the Trends and Challenges Facing Public Sector HR Leaders, and as well as sharing some action items you can take back with you to help your organizations. First up, though, is a bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. So the webinar is going to be recorded, and it will be available on the NEOGOV community website tomorrow, as well as the slides. Presentation will be about 40 minutes. We'll have 20 minutes for questions, so feel free to ask questions along the way. Feel free to type them into the questions and comments bar throughout the webinar today, and we'll be sure to bring those up at the end of the presentation in our last sort of 15-20 minutes. And definitely remember to participate. We will be launching 3 poll questions throughout the webinar. Think of them as little Easter eggs as we're going to traverse through our garden of insight and data today. So be sure to keep up to date and make sure you are participating in our poll questions throughout the webinar. So first, let me present to you and introduce to you our presenters. First up, we have Shane Evangelist. He's our Chief Executive Officer here at NEOGOV. He has 20 plus years of maximizing business outcomes through data and analytics. So I've been really encouraged to see that he's been incorporating a lot of that data methodology and best practices into what we do here at NEOGOV. Also on our panel today, we have Bill Kilmartin. He served as the State Comptroller for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for a decade, and right now he is Accenture's Finance and Administration Industry Lead for North America. Our third panelist today is Jamie Rogers. She is the Deputy Director of NASCA, the National Association of State Administrators. She is the point person for our joint research report, Job 1, Reimagine Today's State Government Workforce. And finally, we have Bob Oglesby, who is the former Chief Administrator for the state of Tennessee. Bob is now NEOGOV's Special Advisor to the CEO. So without further ado, and without me continuing to talk, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. Jamie, would you like us to get us started by telling us about how NASCA, Accenture, and NEOGOV came together on this project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. So I want to tell you, NASCA is, as mentioned, the National Association of State Chief Administrators. And we started this survey because we do a survey of our members, and we ask them, what are the top priorities for the upcoming year? It ranges the gamut from anything from fleet, facilities, HR, and what we were a little bit surprised is that 3 of the top 5 issues was around workforce. And so knowing that workforce was top of mind for state chief administrators, we wanted to do a survey coming out with what are some national benchmarks, what are some trends, what are some things that we need to know that we can share with some states. So we partnered with the Accenture and NEOGOV, knowing that they have a lot of research and background in this area and really can help do a survey. And so if you go to our next slide, how we did the survey, there we go. So what we did in this partnership is that we partnered with Accenture and NEOGOV to survey 33 state chief administrators. So for those who aren't familiar, across the state chief administrators, 75% of HR directors report up to state chief administrators. And when there's a decentralized model, because we found in the survey about a third of HR departments are decentralized, about a third are centralized, and about a third are in between. When you incorporate both centralized and decentralized HRs, about 90% of state HR directors report up to the state CAO. So we interviewed the state CEO on what are their top priorities. We partnered with Accenture. They had a lot of background in the public sector workforce and some great questions that we could compare public sector and private sector. They had a great study on private sector workforce, and we can compare some of the trends that they already knew about private sector workforce with public sector workforce. And then NEOGOV had great access to information on applications and recruiting and hiring. And so we partnered with them on analyzing 14 million applications and new hires, as well as surveying job applicants. So that was a really unique survey that our state chief administrators wanted to know about people who are applying to jobs or people who already have a job but looking to move around within government. What are their top priorities? And so it was a really great partnership. We're excited to tell you today about these recommendations. One thing I think that I want to highlight, since we have so many public sector leaders on the call, is one thing that makes this so unique is that these recommendations really reflect state chief administrators. So we brought this to a focus group, and we brought this to our executive committee, and these recommendations were adopted by state leaders. So these recommendations really carry more weight or really carry the backing of state leaders. And so with that, I've kind of gone over why we did the study and how we did the study, and I'm going to hand it back off.
Jamie, thank you so much. This is Shane. I appreciate the opportunity to work with NASCA and Accenture. Bill's been fantastic, as well as Jamie. And we'll go through the findings now of what came out of this, and hopefully there's some good takeaways for the folks here on the call. First, I'm going to talk about this slide because it sort of anchors a lot of what's happening in the deck. On the horizontal line, you'll see 2013 to 2018. That's sort of the time period to help you read this slide. On the left-hand side of the chart, the one that goes vertical, you'll see percentages going up and down. And so as we looked at all of our data, this is over 14 million job postings over this period of time and over 300,000 hires for state accounts. We saw a 30% increase in job postings during that period. So what does that really mean if you break it down? That means if you had 100 job postings in 2013, you would have had 130 job postings in 2018. So sort of a significant increase in the number of jobs that are being posted at the state level. A couple of things driving that. One is clearly the private sector is very appealing right now. But the second one, and I think that's something we have to continue to keep in mind here in the public sector, is that we've seen an increase in the workforce of people over 55 by 35% since 2000. So if you go back in 2000, you'll start to see that line increase pretty significantly. And as we know, as we get older, we start to retire more. So the combination of the private sector being more competitive and the public sector having an aging workforce has sort of created this increase in job openings. So what you'd hope for is an increase in job openings. You'd hope to see a bunch of applicants. But what we actually have seen happen is a drop in the applicants since that period of time. So again, if in 2013 you had 100 applicants applying, now you only have 81. Probably at the wrong time, right? Because you've had a significant increase in openings. And so let's dig in a little bit. Let's peel that back a little bit. So what we think is happening there. Well, first, I think it starts with what you would consider the value proposition to work in either the public or the private sector. And as Jamie indicated, we surveyed over 3,000 folks who were both applying in the public and private sector to understand what was driving their motivations to work. And from the public sector perspective, this is, I don't think, new news to anybody. It's job security, it's benefits packages, it's doing meaningful work, it's serving one's community. These are the main value propositions that are driving people to the public sector. On the private sector side, competitive salaries came off the chart, career advancement was very high, working in an innovative sector was also very important in that sector as well. And so you can kind of see the dichotomy between the two drivers. However, what's happening right now in the public sector is the job security and benefit packages, which have been sort of the mainstay of value propositions. We've started to see them become less attractive. What's driving that? So first, we've seen healthcare. This was from 1998 to 2011, so a little bit dated, but still a good indication of what's happening with healthcare. We've seen healthcare costs triple for a public employee over that period of time, and I think when we start to see the data come out in 2001 and 2021, we'll see a similar trend. So in addition to healthcare benefits getting worse, we've seen pension plans frozen for new workers, meaning that if you are coming on and being hired today versus, let's say, 10 years ago, you aren't getting pension benefits, and they're frozen. And that was a big part of why you came to work for the government, is because you knew that once you retired, you still had this revenue stream coming. And what we're starting to see is those things are going away. And the question then becomes, well, will they come back? And so we did a little research on this, and what we found is of the $4 trillion that are liabilities, meaning that what's need to be paid to public employees after they retire, there's $1.4 trillion shortfall, meaning it's unfunded today. I only show this to you because I don't think we can think about the fact that pension plans will become unfrozen and they'll return. From a job security perspective, from 2008 to 2018, we've actually seen a reduction in the number of employees that are working at state government. And actually, we've seen 162,000 employees drop off, and almost over a 5% change. We did see a little bit of a pickup in the back 5 years, but in total, over that 10-year period of time, we've seen a pretty dramatic drop in number of employees, which, frankly, some of it was done by people simply retiring or leaving and not backfilling, but some of it was done through reduction in force. And that certainly sits with people who are going to state government now, knowing that it's not quite as secure as it once was. From a private sector perspective, during that period of time, you've seen a significant increase in hiring. So think about the pressure put on you, both from your existing employees, but also new people trying to enter work. You see state and local down or flat on this chart from NASCA, but the private sector, we've seen an increase in 12% from 2007 to 2018. So clearly a lot of pressure being put on you. And I think probably the place where you're seeing the most pressure put on you is in millennials. Millennials are now the largest generation cohort of American labor force. They represent 39% of the folks working in the United States. And the best proxy I've got for what's happening in the public sector is this data coming out from the federal workers. It's only 17% of the workforce in the public sector. So clearly millennials are not being attracted to the public sector as much as they had been previously probably, but certainly the private sector has a leg up on us there. So what does that all mean? It means we got a 49% gap between the number of job openings and the number of applicants. And so if it doesn't get your attention, it probably should, in that we're probably seeing less applicants, less qualified applicants, and ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to have a diminished service to citizens. So what do we do about that? And that was the genesis of this study. I know a lot of folks out there work in state, in county and local as well, and so we've merged all of that data together, and so effectively you're still about a 37% gap. The job openings are staying pretty consistent. We're seeing not as much drop off in applicants, but still a pretty big gap between the two for everybody out there that's working in counties and special districts and cities and whatnot. I get this question a lot, which is, but how does it look like across different jobs? And there's only one professional job that we've seen an increase in number of applicants, and that's IT. Everything else, again, that gap is significant. And some of these are in pretty important jobs that are typically only in the public sector, whether it's fire, a lot of recreation workers, law enforcement, correctional services. We're seeing big drops in those areas. So what does it mean as it relates to I open up a job and how many applicants do I get? Well, in 2013, states would get 71 applicants, and now that's dropped to 44, so a 38% reduction. Again, I think this comes to the quality issues that we're going to want to make sure we address going forward. So we're going to launch a poll question here.
All right, everyone. First poll question of the day. It is, what is the number one reason people resign from your agency? The options are they retiring? Are they leaving for a job in the private sector? Are they leaving for a different job in the public sector? Or other? And if you're voting other, can you kindly put it in the questions pane? What do you mean by other? Did we leave anything out? It would be useful information for us to sort of take back and analyze. First poll question of the day, we have 46% of our audience voting so far, 52. Numbers climbing. We love it. Love the participation. All right, give this a few more seconds to have our folks vote. Let's see if we can get to 75%. We're oh so close. And we are going to call it. And let me share the results with everyone. And very impressive here, 43% said that retiring is the #1 reason that people resign, followed by leaving for a job in the private sector at 28%, and then 22% said leaving for a different job in the public sector, with 6% saying other. So thank you for that participation. I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll results and go back to our presentation.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think thanks, Luigi. It makes sense as we see that aging population that retiring would also be what we're seeing happen out there from your viewpoint. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to have a little bit of the conversation around what we did and what came back from the chief administrators.
Hey, thanks, Shane. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Very good. The data confirms what we already believe to be the case. So let me back up a bit. Greetings from Wakefield, Massachusetts. This is Bill Kilmartin. Wakefield is a small town about 12 miles north of Boston. And as indicated earlier, my role at Accenture is to be our public sector strategy lead for finance and administration. Accenture has been very pleased to collaborate with NEOGOV and the National Association of State Chief Administrators in this research project. We all believe that it is one of the top public policy issues that confronts public sector organizations. Indeed, as you see, not just from the chief administrators, but I can also tell you from my personal interactions, competing and winning in the war for talent is an issue that is now in the C-suite of state government. And as we travel across the country and talk to people, executive leaders, governors, mayors, people of that nature, they're all very, very acutely aware of the challenges and, therefore, what are they going to do about it, the strategies to compete more successfully in the war for talent. So just looking at the data here on the slide, you can see that 42% of the chief administrators ranked difficulty in recruitment as #1 issue, and then quickly followed by concerns about retirement and flexible workforce. Let's move on to the next slide. Just some more data to further reinforce and define the nature of the problem for which we all seek solutions. There's some challenges, and Shane has mentioned this in some of the data that he's already shared. Public sector is not going to compete and win on the battleground of salary. So competitive salaries traditionally is something that the private sector has been able to offer more money than the government sector, and that's the data suggests that's not likely to change. And you combine that over, look in the left-hand side about the value proposition, and Shane shared with you some data about the erosion of the traditional value proposition. Sort of begs the question, what are chief administrators and other executives and leaders in the public sector going to do about it? So let's go to the next slide. There is activity underway. I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler alert here when we get to the recommendations, which will follow later. While government is doing some really good and interesting work, they need to do more of it, sort of the punchline. So, many of the governments you can see on the left-hand side are trying to improve their brand and their marketing approach. And so you look at the 6%, the 23%, the 42%, is indicative of, some efforts to address these challenges from a marketing and branding perspective. And then next to that, to the right, you can see that the governments are also working on streamlining the recruitment process. And Shane has some slides coming up about how important that is to have cycle times that are appropriate to the nature of the recruitment process. And then we talk about making government an attractive place to work. We're going to come back to that point later. That's a real strong piece of the go forward value proposition. And then modernizing job descriptions, which is sort of the foundation of talent management, defining the type of knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies necessary in the public sector workforce is another topic that we'll talk about in more detail in the slides that follow. So I want to turn it now over to Jamie to talk a little bit about the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what we've laid now is the framework. And so one thing that the states really asked is, I know this is critical. I'm finding out that it's becoming even more critical. You saw the data that Shane showed you all, that the gap is only widening. The challenges are only compounding. And I come from the public sector. A lot of those weren't surprises. I think some of the surprises were that it's only getting worse. And so one thing that state chief administrators asked us to do is find this benchmarking data and show me why it's critical. And so I think some of the data we've already showed is why it's critical and why it should rise to the level of C-suites, why it should rise to the level of your governor's attention, your city manager's attention, or your mayor's attention, and how it's becoming even more critical. So I think that's step one. It is critical. It needs the attention of C-suites, deputy level, senior administration. That's what we tried to do here. Secondly, what we were asked to do is tell me how to fix it. We know it's a problem. Give us some recommendations. So we're going to go through two big buckets that were adopted by the state chief administrators. Some were kind of proven trends that have worked. Some were kind of emerging trends that leading states are doing this really well, and they've adopted this. So the two big buckets here are reshape recruiting. Shane is going to go into a lot of this and how to reshape recruiting and some recommendations. And then once you get the great employees in the door, how do you transform the employee experience? So the whole life cycle of once they're there, succession planning, how do you transform that experience? And then throughout this, we're also going to show some leading state examples that can be applied to everyone on the call. And so with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Shane.
Thank you. We've got three, I think, recommendations that make sense coming out of this. We'll show you some examples of those. But the first is becoming more attractive. How do we make sure that when people see who we are, that we put our best foot forward? Second is expanding reach. Worked with a lot of governments and agencies that are actually not getting outside of simply posting. And then third is making sure your speed is quick so that when you get a qualified candidate, you can hire them before they go someplace else. The thing we have found, I think, most is that job postings are pretty agency focused. And I think what we want to really start to do is think about that as being job seeker focused or job advertisements. So if we could change the vernacular internally of I'm going to post a job to I'm going to advertise a job, I think that'll help the mindset internally about how do I actually want to put that in the marketplace. And when we think about putting in the marketplace, we want to think about what are the motivators that drive job seekers. And so what you see on this chart is that same chart earlier, which was what are the things that are interesting to public sector job seekers. That's on the left side: job security, benefits package, meaningful work, serve one's community. And on the top, we actually had enough respondents by job category to get a feel for what drives them in each different job category. And the reason I think that's important is depending on what job you're posting, it should influence your descriptions. And so law enforcement, job security is a big issue, and we should make sure that we're advertising job security there. With maintenance workers, benefits package is a big deal. Below that, though, you'll see that maintenance work is not as a big deal when it comes to meaningful work. So that's not something that I would necessarily promote significantly in my job descriptions or my job promotions. And so let's go through this a little bit. This is an agency job-focused description. This job description is directly off of. It's posted today, so you can find this on a website. It says this is for a mental health state agency. The job responsibilities: the Department of Mental Health is a drug-free workplace. All candidates will be required to pass mandatory pre-employment drug testing. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. We're trying to attract employees, and the first thing we're telling them is we're going to drug test you. Second thing we tell them is you're going to be under clinical supervision of the medical director. So we're going to drug test you and we're going to watch you. And so my point on this is that's probably not the best promotional opportunity for us. We do go a little bit into provides direct patient care and evaluations within the scope of the nurse practitioner authority, coordinate cares, supervision, treatment. And we do start to get a little bit of what the job comes down to. But if we thought about this from a job seeker focused description perspective, I think if we were trying to promote this job, we'd say, do you want to do meaningful work that has a real impact on your community, right? Hitting back meaningful work. Please come join the very tenured team, job security based, nurses and Department of Mental Health. Our mission is to service those who aren't being serviced, which is not only benefit to the community, but also greatly benefits you with a great benefits package. We've got a tenured team of over 10 years. We'd be honored to have you join our team. So I really think we should start thinking about promoting jobs versus describing what you're going to be doing in that job specifically. And so I'm going to turn over to Bob a little bit because he has done some of this or thought through this at Tennessee. So, Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Shane. Yeah, this is one of those situations, I think that we all intuitively knew that the silver tsunami was occurring and we were losing a lot of people to retirement, and that we were also seeing a lot of our workforce go into the private sector. But as alarming as this is, I think it's great to realize that having access to this kind of data and resources is giving us a path forward to really achieve greater success in our targeted recruiting practices. So I'm very excited about the steps forward for HR teams to be able to attract a more qualified pool and get them into the state government workforce. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So when we also think about being attractive, we want to really focus on what do we think we can actually be attractive on and what we can't be, and kind of thinking through that process. We talked a little bit about job security and benefit package. So I'm kind of giving this sort of it's still a benefit, but it's a decreasing benefit for us. We need to keep sort of cognizant of that. Doing meaningful work and serving one's community, we're going to continue to do great things there. And I don't think anybody in the private sector is going to trump us as it relates to these sorts of things. But when it comes to competitive salary and being an innovative sector, I don't believe we're going to be able to compete here. So the question then is, what are we going to do to increase our value proposition to offset job security and benefits packages? And the area that we saw that we have the greatest opportunity is career advancement. How do we help folks understand how they can advance their career? Because clearly it's off the chart. It's the number 2 thing that people going into the private sector want. And if there's a way for us to start a conversation that really talks around career advancement inside the public sector, it'd be fantastic. By the way, the public sector has more people retiring than the private sector, so clearly there's going to be a lot more opportunity for advancement in the public sector, but we don't necessarily point that out. We don't talk to that. I would say, though, that if we were writing that job description, I certainly would start to add things in there around career advancement. Whether you're joining our team for 3 years or 20, you'll have the opportunity to grow your career with us. We offer training courses and work diligently with our team members to enhance their skill sets and progress their career. Point being, we need to start to include this in how we're promoting our jobs, and we need to take some actions that Bill's going to talk about a little bit later about how we truly have succession set up in our organizations and live that going forward. And Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. I'll turn my webcam back on here. So I'm going to go over Louisiana. They're a really great case study that we highlighted in the report. One thing that they did when they were redoing their recruiting is they really focused on the social impact of working for their government. So they did some short videos. They did a whole rebranding campaign on what it means to work for the state of Louisiana and how that means you can give back to the community. It's a LinkedIn campaign. It's videos that kind of start from the beginning of your day to the end of your day, highlighting meaningful work.
Thanks, Jamie. So we'll now move to expand reach. And I think here, when you saw that gap, effectively that 49% gap, you've got to get outside of just putting a job promotion up. And so we asked our job seekers, where are you looking for job opportunities? And what you'll see above this line I just brought up is that it's all online. And so effectively, I think we need to start really thinking about getting outside of posting and getting on job boards, because that's the number 1 place we're seeing people go. Certainly they're coming to the state portals and the local portals for jobs, but job boards are clearly where active seekers are. And I know I hear a lot about Facebook, and I'm not saying we shouldn't advertise on Facebook, but Facebook is only a quarter of the time are our job seekers actually going to Facebook to look for jobs. We're 60% of the time they're actually going out to job boards themselves. And I want to also put this out. I also hear a lot of job fairs, but it's really not a big thing right now inside job seekers looking for employment. So the offline component is being trumped by the online component. And then if you are offline, kind of where are you? And you're on Indeed, you're on governmentjobs.com, you're on USA Jobs and LinkedIn. Again, what I would show you here is we're not seeing a lot of folks on the social networks looking for jobs. Not that we shouldn't spend some time there, but we should truly be evaluating where are job seekers now that we have this 50% gap and growing between job postings and applicants.
All right, second poll question of the day. Is everyone ready? Here we go. Launching it. Do you spend money online to promote job postings? Pretty binary. Answers are yes or no. Last time we had 77% of our attendees voting. We have 400 attendees on today's webinar, so hopefully we can match that rate. Get a few more seconds. We're oh so close. We're at 73% right now. So I'll give this a few more seconds and close down the poll and share the results. So about 2/3, 68% said yes, and then 32% said no for this question. Go ahead and hide the poll results and turn it back to Shane.
That's great. And so I'm glad we're getting out there online. And then improving hiring speed. Obviously, NEOGOV's history is an applicant tracking system. Here's what's great about what we've seen at the states using our application. This is over 57 different state agencies, and I think 27 different states themselves. We've seen the hiring over the last 10 years drop by 28%, meaning it took 101 days to hire in 2008 and only 73 days to hire in 2018. And back to the chart that Bill showed earlier, there's a clear focus around streamlining the process and making it faster, because as we get these applicants in, we don't want them to drop out too early. And here's what we would call quartiling it, which is we're going to break down what's happening inside the hiring process itself. And the first quartile hires within 36 days. The second quartile hires within 25 days. That just means in 25% chunks. I think when you start to find out if it's taking 81 days to 120 days and you're in that third and fourth quartile, you really want to start getting focused around how do I speed up my process? What can I do to make it faster so that I don't lose really qualified candidates in the process itself? Jamie?
Yeah, thank you. So playing off what he just mentioned, the state of Ohio is a case study that we highlighted in the report. They really did a deep dive on how do they bring in state police officers in quicker. So the state of Ohio has a really robust continuous improvement shop. They got state employees together. They got the HR directors. They got some senior leadership. They also had the state police officers sit down for a 5-day workshop. And over that 5-day workshop, they mapped the entire process to hire a state police officer. And this was all a Kaizen exercise going back to their continuous improvement exercise on how do we get the best talent in the door quicker. And so through this 5-day process, they remapped out the entire hiring process. They dropped the total days to hire state police officers from 181 days down to 61 days. Noting what Shane talked about is at 181 days, they were losing the top talent. The top talent was going somewhere else because it was taking so long. So there's a great case study and example of how they sat down. They were really intentional. They got a bunch of people together, 5 days, and shortened the hiring process. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Jamie. We'll turn it over to Bill here. Bill is going to talk about transforming the employee experience post-hire.
Hey, thanks, Shane. So let's take a look at some more data. I'm on slide 43, I guess. So we know that automation and innovation would be important to examine, and so we asked some questions to collect some data, on those topics through this research project. And what we suspected is indeed reflected in the data. It's not an area of strength. If you go over to the right-hand side, and you see that the private sectors are really the private sector, chief operating officers, chief human resource officers, chief administrative type people are really emphasizing the role of automation in innovation in their workforce, much more greatly than is the case of the 21% that you see there from the public sector officials. So an area that needs to be addressed. And that's just further reinforced when you look over on the left-hand side, and you see that the process automation and things of that nature, bringing in the robotics and new automating certain tasks so that the humans can go off and do more interesting work, is also an area that begs improvement. Let's go to the next slide. We talked a bit about the importance of training, professional development, skills development. So this, in contrast to the previous slide, this is an area of strength. So this would be an area that we would recommend, based on the data and our professional judgment, is an area that we can differentiate, where public sector can be distinctive and in advantageous position in competing for the war for talent. You see that the emphasis of professional development and training offerings, 31%, the bar at the top there, is really, really strong. So, the point here is do more of this. Let's go to the next slide. Succession planning, takes on a higher degree of importance when you look at the demographic trends and the, predictive trends of the workforce with the so-called silver tsunami. I think of, people like myself that have worked in the government for 25 years and now consulting for, 20 years. And I think of, the next generation of practitioners and public servants and where they're going to get, how are they going to be groomed? How are they going to be nurtured? So like the innovation and the automation, this is not an area of strength. This is an area of weakness that should be improved upon. So we focus, the data tells us that this is a target of opportunity for a significant headroom for improvement. I'm going to make another comment here. It's a bit off the agenda, but Shane had mentioned before about the erosion of some of the traditional government benefits and the pensions. And you talked, Shane, about the unfunded pension liabilities. This is a topic close to my heart. And you talked about the $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion of unfunded pension liabilities. Just to put an exclamation point on that, I've been studying this a lot. I use the term generational debt. The unfunded pension liabilities in state governments is 8.4% of the gross domestic product of the United States of America. So not only is it a big number in terms of raw numbers, it's a big percentage of the gross domestic product. Anyway, I digress. Let me move on. Luigi, I'm going to hand this back to you for another poll question.
All right, thank you, Bill. Last poll question of the day. Is everyone ready? Do you have a well-documented succession plan in place to fill those critical vacancies? Question very near and dear to my heart, overseeing our employee development solutions here at NEOGOV. So we'd like to know from your end, do you have a well-documented process for succession planning? Remember last time we got 77% of our audience voting. Let's see for our last poll question of the day. Can we top that? Can we end on a high note for participation here? Give it a couple more seconds and go ahead and close it down. We are actually stuck at 70. Oh, here we go. There we go. All right, sharing the results. 70% said no. 19% said yes for some key positions. 9% said I don't know, and only 1% of our over 400 attendees said yes. We do have a well-documented succession planning process in place in our organizations, which is really in line with the same poll question we asked at our NEOGOV Community Live call last month in March, sort of the same sort of percentages. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll results and swing it back over to our panelists.
Thank you. That poll question doesn't shock me much, as the data said very similar. 73% of states do not have well-documented succession planning. One state that we do look to is Oregon spent a lot of time on that beginning, the recruiting, and the middle employee life cycle, and so they realized that one area that needed to focus a lot more was on succession planning. So they have, you can go to their Twitter, or it's called Workday Oregon, for some examples of stuff that they've done kind of early on in the life cycle of an employee's. But now they have a much more aggressive succession planning, as I see that it's a key to some of their state government future workforce. And so there's a state doing it really well, kind of starting the succession planning. And with that, I'll give it back to Bill.
Thanks, Jamie. So now we're going to shift over to the topic of performance evaluations and look at some more data, and just put this into context of the way we at Accenture think about the talent management lifecycle, where it starts with a definition of the jobs, and then the discovery of the talent to fill those jobs, and then the development of people through training and professional development, which directly relates to job evaluations. And then, of course, the deployment of those people, the right people into the right roles at the right time. So the point here is, let me mention this too. Literally Monday afternoon, we were having the conversation with the Secretary of Administration and the Deputy Secretary of Administration for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on their approach to talent management and their participation in this research report. And so one of the topics they were really focused on was, how can government turn performance evaluation, individual employee evaluation, into a positive part of the talent management lifecycle, so that it becomes a technique by which employees are incentivized to grow and develop their skills and talent, and indeed, stay as long-term contributors to the public benefit. And that's really the point here. Is we know that it's something that is valued by the applicants, especially the millennial generation. And so let's turn this into a real positive, another arrow in our quiver in the competing for the war for talent. Jamie, I'm going to hand this out back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of playing exactly what you were just saying, Michigan is a great state to look at for an example. If you're looking at a state that's really reshaped how they do performance evaluations and how they do employee engagement. So we, at the back of the study, we did a pretty in-depth report on what Michigan's been doing. And so I'm going to list off a couple things that they've been doing to reshape the employee career growth. They took this as a really multi-pronged approach, saying that in order to transform the employee experience and employee engagement, you're going to have to take on a couple different tactics. So they do a leadership training program, and then they do an individual performance plan that they do quarterly. So they went away with the year-long performance reports, and they do them quarterly. And the individual performance reports are less they're still for accountability, but they're more focused on coaching. So coaching, track your career progression. Where do you want to go in the state of Michigan? Earlier, we heard that one of the benefits of state government is that they're quite large and that people want to progress in their career, and that you can move from one department, one division, from parks over to criminal justice, back over to waste management, so that they have a lot of opportunity. And so they're in part of their performance plans and their performance discussions, they talk a lot about career progression in these quarterly reports. They also really involve the employees in the performance improvement workshops, so involving the employees in how to solve some of those problems. Again, that goes back to some stuff Shane talked about, as that they want to have meaningful work, and so part of being meaningful work is feeling like you have an impact in state government, so being a part of the big solutions for state government. So they really involve employees in those workshops. And then based on interviews with the state of Michigan, they said one of the best things that they've done are these brown bag lunches. And so these were brown bag lunches with senior leadership that would go around. It would kind of open up like a town hall. They would have 100 people at some of the sessions, 300 people at some of the other sessions. And they were really to discuss what's going on in the state. So again, to make you feel like you're involved in the mission of state government. So they took a multi-pronged approach. Right now we're talking about how they really redid performance evaluations to focus on the career progression. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Bill.
I think it's actually over to Shane.
Yeah, I think no problem. Yeah, no problem. One, I'm happy that Michigan's, little plug for NEOGOV here, the one I'll give you is we're happy that Michigan's using our performance system to help manage that. But yeah, what we're going to do, I think our statement here is be bold and start now. And the intent of this was not to discourage anybody, but simply to open the eyes up to see what we should be doing on a go-forward basis. And with that, we'll open it up for questions if you guys have any.
Yeah, feel free to type in your questions, again, in the questions pane. I know we went through a lot of material today, so we'll give you a couple of minutes here. Think of any questions you have, type it into the pane, and then we'll sort of call them out and we'll have our panelists answer them. Also, if you have any just comments, anything that sort of really resonated with you, feel free to just enter that in as well in terms of like feedback, what you really like most, what you may want to do, and we can sort of share that with the audience just to make it a little bit more interactive. We do have some questions in the questions pane. The first one is, are the time to hire metrics that we showed, are those based on the vacancy date or the posting date? So what is the start, basically, of that time to hire?
Yeah, it's based on the posting date.
Okay. And we have another question here. Maybe Jamie can answer this one. Related to the Ohio State Patrol, you mentioned that they really improved their time to hire by making some improvements in their application process. The question was, does Ohio test their candidates? Because we know that can also be sometimes a bottleneck and prolong the time to hire metric.
Yeah, they still did keep the testing as part of the state patrol process. And then going back to that previous question about vacancy rate, I think that's a really important comment, because something could be vacant for multiple months before the posting deadline. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah, but this data is all based on when the job's we're going to switch the vernacular, promoted.
Yep. But the HR directors, they may be thinking, well, that position was really open for 8 months. I didn't post it until month 7.
Yep, that's correct.
And just a quick follow-up on the time to hire. The question came in saying, is that counted in work days or calendar days?
That is total calendar days.
Got it. And this could be potentially a good one for either for Bill or Jamie to answer. Let's see here. Can you speak a bit about how to promote succession planning from within while remaining equal opportunity? Anyone want to field that one? Say that again, Bill?
Yeah,
I was going to defer to Jamie.
What is that equal opportunity? But Bill, I don't know if I know this is close to your heart on succession planning. I don't know if that person can write.
Yeah, let me jump in here. I think there's certainly opportunities here, and I think we've heard a lot of issues associated with promotions and equal opportunities around promotions. I think what's great about a great succession plan is to identify the areas in your organization that are critical. Identify the skill sets that are needed in those areas, as well as the job experience you want those people to have. And then as you move down the organization, and doing that in a fair manner. But once we identify the skills that are required, and then we can identify the folks that need those skills because they have that experience, or need that experience because they have those skills, or in general start to train around those skills, then I think the opportunity becomes equal for everybody. And certainly we can start to do some of that to eliminate any bias, but obviously that'll be part of it. But the most important part is identification of the skills, identification of the experience, and then push that through the organization. It's the best way to get through bias is to have a clear understanding of the skill sets and the experience required.
And yeah, I'm going to weigh in on this one too. A leading practice in succession planning is to recognize that it is a multifactorial equation, in that there are a lot of elements of the workforce strategy that should be addressed and balanced in the appropriate way. So not only is it grooming, one successor, potentially the deputy becoming the top person, but there's also other factors to consider: gender equity, racial, ethnical type equity. There's a variety of factors that should all become part of a successful succession plan.
So one thing that we heard when we did the survey of states is there are some unique barriers when it comes to state succession planning. And part of that is that you have to open the job. You can't necessarily handpick the next successor. And so we did hear some of those challenges that are unique. I think in the states that we're seeing it doing really well is that they're doing broad leadership training and broad reskilling, so that when positions do come up, multiple people are trained throughout state government, rather than you are succession planning person B to fill the post of person A.
Here's another great question. What is the most effective strategy to get, mayors or governors to understand that organizational operations are just as critical as the political aims of the administration? I know we spoke a lot about automating the processes and investing in technology. How can we convince our senior leaders that those operational processes are just as important?
Yeah, I'll take this. I would start with the data. So if you're a NEOGOV employee or customer today, and you want your data on what does your gaps look like, what is your job seeker numbers drop to, what is your postings increased by, I've seen this, it works very well. It's sort of super powerful to sit in front of those leaders and show them your specific data, benchmark that against what we're seeing in other cities or counties or states, and be able to show what we think we need to do because the data is indicating we've got some issues on a go-forward basis. And whether that's the hiring process speed, where NEOGOV will be rolling out some benchmarking data soon that you'll be able to benchmark yours against other peer groups to find out what areas you need to improve and then take action on those, or whether it's just in general the number of applicants versus the number of postings, but use the data to your benefit. I know it's hard. Historically, we haven't done a great job from an HR perspective getting that type of data in a meaningful format that we can take action on, but we're here to help. And I think that's been super powerful for us as we talk to our clients, and I think that'll be a great way for you to talk up in your organizations as well.
Hey, Shane, I would add, I think it's important to connect this back to citizen service. So you look at, we're trying to keep all these departments, these citizen-facing departments in business, right? And so if we look at this data and see what we can do to keep them in operations, be running efficient, effectively, and not having delays in customer service, that's going to get back to the pain points of the governor as to what they're really all about. So serving, the customers and citizens of the state.
Shane, you read my mind. We're getting a lot of questions saying, do you have data available that can help tell the success stories from the state agencies that are actually using the multiple modules of NEOGOV? So as you said, we have that data. We can definitely help provide that and help you sort of make that pitch to your senior leadership.
Yeah, reach out to us, reach out to your account managers. We'll certainly get that data ready for you and presented. We've got a pretty quick format to put it in.
Perfect. And another question here, did anything come up in the research that said that bargaining units were impeding development opportunities? Any thoughts on that?
So I'm willing to take this.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Jamie.
So one thing, this is Jamie. One thing we did look at as part of the survey is we looked at if it was a predominantly union state and a predominantly non-union state, and if there were any statistical differences in the data. And so we didn't find any significant differences except in the modernized job description questions. And so that's where states slightly answer differently on how much they're able to modernize job descriptions, because oftentimes those are bargained as part of collective bargaining with police or fire. So there was some differences there in modernizing job descriptions. I think that's the only thing that we noted was a difference in union states versus non-union states.
Perfect. We had a follow-up question to actually our discussion earlier on succession planning. So how do you promote succession planning within a merit-based system? What's on that?
I think that this is Jamie, and I don't know if Bill wants to help answer this at all, but I think that goes back to, again, there are some unique challenges to government and succession planning. And one thing that we did hear that often it's not budgeted for overlap. So if a really important person is leaving, you can't overlap your time with the other person's time for a week to train the new person. So we do hear that there are some unique challenges around succession planning. I think a lot of this goes to, are you training multiple people underneath you and focusing on upskilling, management training, leadership training. In the Michigan case study, Washington, multiple states are really focusing on some of this leadership training to help with some of their succession planning.
Yeah, just to elaborate further on what Jamie said, there's discussion now about follow-on research reports. Based on, this report is sort of a launch pad, where would we go next? In one of the topic areas under active discussion is this topic of succession planning. And another one, by the way, is the performance, job evaluations. And, maybe more research is needed there in order to identify the leading practices in the public sector and mature those in a more defined way than what is currently available. So stay tuned, perhaps more to follow on that topic.
Perfect, thank you. This might be a good one for Shane to answer. A question came in, where did the 120 days come from in referencing the quartiles? Is a good start for building an analysis in the quartile category? Yeah,
so this is 120 days would be the last quartile, the last 25% of hiring is taking 120 days on average to hire their employees from the time that they post to the time that they make the job offer and is accepted. It's not when they start, it's when job offer has been accepted. And so what you would say is the folks that do it the fastest, I'm not saying the best, but the fastest is in the first quartile. The folks that are taking the longest is out there in the fourth quartile, and effectively they're about 120 days.
Thank you, Shane. Another question came in saying, what are the best ways to push forward the often outdated civil service practices, perhaps on a national level? For example, in our state, the expectation is really at minimum 6 months should be required from posting to hire, but that's not really acceptable in the modern era. What can we do at the state and national level to really be more progressive and, push forward, more up-to-date civil service practices?
Well, that's a challenge, right? I think there's some things around continuous job postings that can make sure you keep that cycle shorter. So you've always got these jobs posted, so that timeline's running. But certainly, I empathize with you and the challenges you face around some restrictions you get to hiring. Because in the private sector, I could sit down with a person here at NEOGOV. I can sit down with a person, interview them, and hire them immediately. And you certainly don't have those same. I would say that you may have some restrictions on the front end, and that may be what you have to deal with from a constraint perspective. But once you're in the process, try to get that moving as fast as it can, because hopefully that'll help control what you can control.
Yeah, and just to elaborate further on that, the civil service exists for a reason. Actually, for those historians on the webinar, you go back, it's about 100 years ago. The concept of civil service was invented and instituted in governments across the country. In Massachusetts, I believe it was 1922, so it was only 98 years ago. And it existed to solve a problem, okay? But here we are in 2019, conditions have changed. And so I would respectfully suggest that it's time for civil service not to necessarily be abolished, because its fundamental reasons still exist, but to be adapted to be more appropriate in the age that we live in.
I'd encourage you to share this report with your governor and your legislators. They're going to see that the peer performance of where you are in your quartile compared to that of the nation. That's going to help drive improvements throughout the system.
Bill, I don't know if this came up in any of your conversations. Pennsylvania has done significant work in their kind of civil service reform.
Yeah, and I would call it, adapting the system to be contemporaneous to, the problems and the needs of today. And so I think that's a very good case example that others might want to look at of how to take civil service and reimagine civil service in the time frame of 2019.
And our last question for webinar, in this sort of battle for talent, what would you recommend the best way to expand from recruiting locally to nationally, especially when there is a limited local talent pool? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to do is get outside of where you're currently promoting the jobs. And so some of these national boards will certainly do that. And you can geo-target on those national boards to make sure you're showing up where you want to get nationally for certain jobs of sort of skill sets that are required outside. I think the folks that do it really well in that area are like universities because they're pulling from a larger pool. And if you look at what they do from an advertisement perspective, they get geo-focused and geo-targeted on areas of the country that they want to pull people in from, and they're using online job boards for that.
All right. Thank you, Shane. And just to sort of wrap up today's webinar, thank you all for attendance. We have a lot of other questions in the questions pane, so we'll be sure to answer those as well when we share the recording and the presentation. We also got a lot of comments that people really love all the data. They actually love this forum to be able to share some best practices. They want to see more of that. So hopefully this is something that, is a recurring thing that we do in the future. We have some more webinars where we can come together, share best practices, and share some of that data. So again, thank you for joining. Feel free to follow us here at NEOGOV on Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook. And we hope you have a great day. And thank you for joining. And
Yeah, and I would just add, I really want to thank Jamie and Bill and Bob for getting on the call and sharing their experiences to help our customer base a little each day. Thank you very much.
yes, thank you to our panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Bye.
Okay.